Throughout the years of the Second Age, roughly 2 to 3% of the population proved capable of channeling shai'tan and saidar, the male and female halves of the One Power, a form of magic derived from the true source, a primordial cosmic energy which turned the wheel of time. Called Aes Sedai, meaning servants of all, those trained to channel the One Power worked for the betterment of mankind, leading to a golden age of peace and prosperity. With the help of these magic users, humanity eliminated hunger, poverty, and homelessness, created advanced technologies, perfected food production, and joined together under a united world government, advised by the Hall of Servants, the governing body where Aes Sedai gathered to make decisions. Varied in their raw potential and abilities, Aes Sedai learned to weave the One Power through elemental magic spells, seeing males excel with fire, earth, and spirit, learning to aggressively take hold of shai'tan and forcefully submit it to their will, while females primarily used air, water, and spirit, trained to more passively allow the flow of saidar to consume them. One of the most important lessons they learned was to know their limits, as wielding too much of the One Power risked self-destruction or burning out and losing their ability to channel. In order to bypass these limitations, Aes Sedai created Ongrial, Saw-Ongrial, and Ter-Ongrial, magical artifacts which amplified and expanded their skills, allowing channelers to wield more shai'tan or saidar than was naturally possible. Living in an age of legends, their near-utopian civilization began its decline when researchers at the University of Kolam Dawn drilled a small bore through the pattern of reality to reach the true power, a new source of magical energy which they discovered could be channeled equally by both men and women. Yet they soon learned this wondrous new energy came from the Dark One, shai'tan, who was imprisoned outside the pattern at the moment of creation. And while the bore was not big enough for his escape, it allowed him to directly influence their world, creating a renaissance of greed, anger, jealousy, and violence. Over the next century, humanity grew increasingly susceptible to their evil impulses, leading many to worship the Dark One, lured by promises of immortality and greater prominence in the New World Order. While ordinary humans who turned to the Shadow were known as Friends of the Dark, his greatest servants were the Aes Sedai defectors called the Chosen or Forsaken, charged with leading his forces and governing conquered territories. Launching the War of the Shadow, also called the War of Power, a devastating 10-year conflict in which Forsaken sought to release the Dark One from captivity, Shadow armies were greatly augmented by Trollocs and other Shadow spawn, vicious monsters created and bred for battle. Organizing themselves under the dragon Lews Therin Telamon, the greatest living Aes Sedai, the forces of light fought back, yet were nonetheless pushed to the brink of defeat because of betrayals, disorganization, low morale, and increased division among their leadership. With a shadow victory fast approaching, Lews Therin Telamon sought to use both shai'tan and saidar to seal the bore with 7 Quendiar, while his adversary, the female Aes Sedai Latra Pose Concord, wanted to use special Ter-Ongrial and Saw-Ongrial to create a secondary prison around the bore. Though Latra convinced the most powerful female Aes Sedai of the Hall to refrain from aiding Lews Therin, her plan was made impossible when the territory holding the necessary Ter-Ongrial was captured by the enemy. With all efforts to retrieve the Ter-Ongrial failing, the Shadow forces on the brink of victory and female Aes Sedai unrelenting in their continued opposition, Lews Therin marched on Sheol Ghul, the focal point of the Dark One's power, with 113 of his closest male supporters and an honor guard of 10,000 warriors. Proving doubly successful, Lews Therin sealed the bore, imprisoning both shai'tan and his 13 most powerful Forsaken. However, because only men participated in the ritual, the Dark One was able to perform a counterstroke, tainting the male half of the One Power with his corruption, causing every surviving wielder of shai'tan to lose their sanity with an unyielding desire for chaos, destruction, and violence, resulting in the breaking of the world, 3 centuries of mass devastation which reshaped lands and seas, only ending when female Aes Sedai finished killing or gentling the last of their male counterparts. As for Lews Therin, he went on to murder his own family in his madness, and upon realizing what he did, killed himself in a massive explosion of shai'tan, which created Dragonmount and the island later called Tar Valon. Though the Dark One and Forsaken were gone, the problems faced in sealing the bore meant the threat was not completely eradicated, and so prophecies emerged, including the Korathon cycle, which foresaw the return of the Shadow as well as the Dragon, reborn in a new body to once again face off against this evil and save the world. For a time, some male Aes Sedai sought refuge in steadings, special regions populated by large, thoughtful, peace-loving Ogier. As it was impossible to channel the One Power in a steading, they were protected from the Dark One's corruption. However, these male channelers could not resist the allure of shai'tan forever, and so eventually departed, hoping to discover the taint was gone, but instead inevitably went mad, causing further destruction until gentled or killed. Although female Aes Sedai were unaffected by the taint on shai'tan, they nonetheless suffered grievous harm from the breaking, with many killed and others scattered throughout the world. In the western continent of Shan-Chan, surviving female Aes Sedai became ruthless despots, conquering independent territories which remained in a near-constant state of war over the next 2,000 years. Killing any male channelers found, they ruled through lies and treachery, believing honesty and loyalty utter foolishness. Unlike the other regions of the world, male channelers survived in the southern continent, named the Land of the Madmen, where they continued to run rampant without restraint. Though their insanity caused significant seismic activity, female channelers were also considered dangerous and unpredictable, never able to unify or organize themselves to the extent necessary to control the males. Lastly, there was the Eastern Continent, divided into 4 unique regions, with the northern mountains of Doom separating the southern realms from Sheol Ghul, and the Redlands of the Great Blight, where surviving Shadow Spawn lived and organized their attacks against the realms of men. Southeast of the Great Blight were the lands of Shara, where channelers left behind the name Aes Sedai to become Ayad, slave-like servants of the united Sharan nation. Though females were forced to live in secluded villages with limited rights and responsibilities, male channelers were simply used as breeding stock until inevitably killed by around the age of 21. Further west, some few surviving female Aes Sedai joined the Genaiel clan in the desert lands of the Aiel Waste, helping them found the city of Rhuideon. However, the project was never completed, as both the Genaiel and Aes Sedai died off, leaving the city abandoned for thousands of years. Among the other Aiel clans, female magic users became Wise Ones, acting as advisors to clan chiefs, while male channelers were sent north to die fighting the Dark One. In order to preserve the knowledge of their ancient connection to the Aes Sedai, clan chiefs and Wise Ones visited the city of Rhuideon, where they learned the secret truth about their past. Finally, there were the Westlands, where female channelers retained more unity and authority than any other region of the world, yet in these early years after breaking, they too were plagued with division and strife, as competing factions struggled for power. Despite holding a meeting to discuss unification in 47 AB, war consumed the second half of the 1st century after breaking, until a single faction emerged victorious, defeating their greatest Aes Sedai rivals, led by Lidain Rajan and Melaine Harvol. Uniting under the first Amerlin seat, Elisane Tishar, they founded the city-state of Tar Valon in 98 AB, but did not finish construction until 202 AB, with the White Tower acting as their central stronghold, where they governed, held meetings, housed themselves, and trained new Aes Sedai. Refusing to aggressively recruit by testing all women and girls, they instead sought out those who already displayed some measure of skill or potential to channel, preferring those of younger ages as they were more easily trained. Beginning as novices, these young girls divided their days between learning about the One Power and manual labor, working as all manner of servants to teach them humility and test their resolve. Once this stage was complete, novices performed a challenging ritual in which they passed naked through 3 ter'angreal doorways, each showing them alternate versions of their lives, presenting compelling scenarios which they ultimately had to leave by returning through the same doorway, thereby choosing the life of an Aes Sedai over whatever temptation they saw. This test was so difficult and traumatic, novices were given 2 opportunities to delay starting the ritual. However, if they refused a 3rd time or failed to complete it once began, they were put out of the tower. Should they pass the test, they were given a serpent ring to be worn on the 3rd finger of their left hand, and title of accepted, spending their days studying more advanced knowledge and teaching novices. When their time as accepted was over, they took another test with a ter'angreal, this time performing 100 complex weaves with the one power, while remaining composed and free of distractions. If they passed, they were permitted to swear the 3 oaths of the Aes Sedai upon the oath rod, a special ter'angreal which forced the speaker to abide by their vows. The 3 oaths forbid Aes Sedai from speaking a lie, making weapons for a man to kill another, or use the one power as a weapon except against dark friends, shadow spawn, or in the last extreme defense of her life or another of the tower. Once risen to full sisterhood, they could wear the ring on any finger they wished, bond a warder, creating a magical connection with a male warrior to act as their companion, and joined one of 7 colored Ajas, each of which represented a different aspect of their responsibilities as Aes Sedai. Starting with the Red Aja, they were charged with capturing those who misused the one power, including women who broke tower law, and any man that channeled or falsely declared himself the Dragon Reborn. The Green, or Battle Aja, were warrior Aes Sedai who bonded as many warders as they wished, and sometimes married one. The Grey Aja focused on diplomacy and mediation, while the Browns preserved knowledge, acting as librarians and bookkeepers. Then there were the Yellow Aja, comprised of healers, the Blue Aja devoted to justice, and the White Aja, which studied philosophy. Love the Wheel of Time or any other series? Then why not check out Audible, where they have the largest collection of audiobooks available. Sign up through the links below for regular membership and get a 30-day free trial, or else try Premium Plus for a 60-day trial and up to 3 free audiobooks. For those who prefer to read their stories, there is the Kindle Unlimited plan, where you get as many ebooks as you wish. If you haven't already, be sure to check out the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson, narrated by Michael Kramer and Kate Redding, along with the prequel novel and history book. A special thanks to all those who contribute to CivilizationEx, like Sir Rick Loam, Delacruz the Freed, Sir Xavier, Defender of the Flame, and Kyle Blitzsword. If you'd like to help the channel, be sure to give a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and click on the links below, or else go to patreon.com/CivilizationEx, where you can gain early access to videos, vote on future content, and watch the Patreon-only series, Heroes of Lore and Legend.